The sky split with the cry of Evelyn, the eagle, her scream sharp against the mountain winds. The silence that followed felt heavier than thunder. Her nest, once alive with a chick's fragile chirps, now lay quiet. Evelyn circled above the cliff, her wings carving through the mist. She scanned the rocks below, but the void where her chick's voice should have been left her trembling. Nature wastes no time with comfort. The mountain wind mocked her, carrying whispers of predators. Evelyn shrieked again, as if her call could summon what was already lost. The forest below answered only with silence, and that silence weighed more than death. Evelyn landed on the cliff's edge, her talons scraping against stone. She lowered her head into the nest, nudging the fragments of eggshell, but found only silence. The wind carried the scent of wolves below. She hissed, wings spread wide, daring the unseen to rise. Evelyn's cries once called life to her nest, but now, her voice was swallowed by emptiness. She leaned forward, searching the horizon. Nathan, her mate, had not returned. The mountain mocked her with stillness, its silence heavier than any predator's shadow. The valley stirred with movement. Shadows rippled along the tree line, and Evelyn knew eyes were fixed on her. Her chest rose and fell, each breath short and sharp. She scanned the distance for Nathan, but the sky offered no trace of his wings. Her heart pounded like war drums. Predators never waited long. The silence around her was not empty. It was watching, waiting, promising violence. Evelyn lifted her head and shrieked again, her call stretching far, but the reply was only the echo of her own fear. Nathan had always been the provider, soaring into storms to hunt, returning with prey clutched in his talons. Now his absence screamed louder than Evelyn's cries. She tilted her head, scanning the ridge where he once landed. A feather, larger than hers, drifted across the wind, tumbling slowly downward. Evelyn leapt into the air, her wings thrashing with force. If Nathan had fallen, the mountain had claimed more than her chick. The silence below was no accident. Something darker pressed at the edges of her world. The scream of the mountain wind rose higher, tearing across the valley. Evelyn soared into the current, her wings straining against its power. She searched for Nathan, for her chick, for any sound beyond the relentless roar. The emptiness below mirrored the emptiness within her nest. Hunger gnawed at her, but grief carved deeper. She was not just hunting for survival, she was searching for proof that she was not alone. Yet the silence mocked her, and the sky offered no answers, only endless blue fading into shadow. The mountain winds eased into whispers as Evelyn settled upon the cliff edge, her body trembling. She lowered her head, pressing her beak gently against the broken shells. Her eyes searched the sky as if Nathan might suddenly appear. She remembered how his wings once shielded the nest from storms, how his talons carried prey back to her waiting beak. The memory stung like fire. The emptiness in the nest was more than silence. It was a wound. Evelyn whispered into the wind, her call softer now, almost tender, as though her chick could still hear her. From the shadows of the ridge, a new sound emerged, the rustle of feathers. Evelyn lifted her head sharply, her eyes piercing the horizon. Nathan was not there. Instead, a raven perched upon a twisted branch, its black feathers glistening in the pale sun. It croaked harshly, mocking her grief with its call. Evelyn's wings opened wide, feathers bristling with rage. The raven tilted its head, unafraid, as though daring her to act. The bond between predator and scavenger was always thin. She hissed, driving her pain into defiance. The raven flapped away with a mocking cry, leaving Evelyn alone once more. She scanned the horizon until her gaze fixed upon the mountain ridge. There, the ghost of memory returned. Nathan's shadow once carved across that ridge like fire against the clouds. Evelyn's heart beat faster, wings twitching as if to follow the memory. She longed for his return, for the strength of his presence. But absence weighed heavier than hunger. Still, she refused to collapse. For her chick, for Nathan, for the echo of life itself, she would endure. Below, the valley opened like a mouth, its silence deeper than before. Evelyn tilted her head and saw faint movement in the trees. A fox slipped from the shadows, its coat red as fire, its eyes bright with hunger. It did not climb, not yet, but its presence burned like a threat. Evelyn raised her wings again, her chest puffed with defiance. "Come closer," her scream declared, "and you will bleed." The fox paused, ears twitching, then melted back into the shadows. The warning was clear, her nest was not safe. The sun slid lower, burning the horizon with crimson light. Evelyn perched at the nest, her feathers glowing in fiery tones. The mountain wind carried her call outward again, but the silence that answered was unbearable. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the memory of Nathan's warmth beside her. She could not abandon the nest, not yet. The shells still held stories, and the sky still demanded her cry. Evelyn raised her head and screamed once more, a sound of grief, defiance, and hope stitched into a single breath. The forest below trembled with movement as shadows thickened. Evelyn soared above, her wings straining against turbulent air. Hunger pressed at her body, sharp and merciless, but fear weighed heavier. She scanned the horizon for Nathan, yet only silence remained. The rustling of branches below revealed wolves gathering, their eyes glinting with hunger. She screamed into the wind, her cry both warning and plea. The mountains did not answer. The valley swallowed her voice, returning only echoes that deepened her dread. Nature itself seemed to conspire against her. The wolves prowled nearer, their howls tearing through the valley. Evelyn's talons flexed as she hovered above, daring them to climb, yet knowing their hunger was patient. Clouds gathered over the mountains, thunder rumbling in the distance. The storm mirrored her heart, restless and unyielding. The forest's silence fractured as branches cracked under shifting bodies. Evelyn cried again, her wings beating like drums of war. She was alone against the growing shadows. For the first time, she feared her strength might not be enough to defend the nest. Rain began to fall, cold drops streaking across Evelyn's feathers. She fought the rising winds, her wings shaking against the storm's fury. Lightning split the sky, illuminating her scar and the nest's fragility. Hunger gnawed deeper, but her fear for Nathan was worse. She imagined him caught in the same storm, his wings torn by the same violent winds. Evelyn shrieked again, her voice desperate. The mountains replied with thunder, cruel and indifferent. Nature's wrath pressed upon her like an executioner, and the wolves waited below for her to falter. The storm struck harder, tearing branches from trees, shaking the cliffs. Evelyn dove through the wind, her feathers ripped by the current. She searched for prey, desperate to silence her hunger, but the valley offered nothing. The wolves snarled below, snapping at one another in frenzy. Evelyn rose again, her chest heaving, each breath ragged. She glanced at the nest, knowing its silence would break her if she looked too long. She was being tested by every force, hunger, storm, and predator alike. Still, she fought to endure. Darkness swallowed the valley as the storm deepened. Evelyn clung to a rocky outcrop, feathers soaked, body trembling. Her cries had grown hoarse, fading into whispers. The wolves retreated to the shadows, but their hunger had not vanished. The silence that returned was sharper than their howls. Evelyn raised her head, eyes burning with defiance. Alone, starving, hunted, she refused to yield. The storm raged around her, the mountain shook beneath her, yet her spirit endured. For Nathan, for her lost chick, for herself, she would not break. The storm eased into a restless silence, and Evelyn's feathers dripped with rain. She scanned the cliffs, her eyes sharp against the dim light. Movement stirred below, yet it was not the wolves. A shadow crossed the ridge, wings cutting the air. Evelyn's heart raced. She cried out, believing Nathan had returned, but the truth struck like stone. Another eagle soared into view, larger, darker, its wings scarred from battles of survival. This was no ally. It was Marcus, the rival, his presence more threat than comfort. Marcus circled slowly, his eyes sharp, calculating. Evelyn's wings spread wide as she screamed, her voice both defiance and plea. Marcus tilted in the air, his shadow sweeping across the nest. His presence was not hunger alone. It was conquest. Rivals took more than prey. They claimed territory, nests, and survival itself. Evelyn trembled with exhaustion, but she would not let him near the shells. This mountain belonged to her family, not him. The silence of her chick pressed against her heart, yet her scream carved through the valley once again. Evelyn leapt into the air, feathers slick with rain, her body aching but spirit unbroken. She rose to meet Marcus, her wings slicing through the currents. Their cries clashed in the sky like blades. Marcus tilted downward, talons flexing, eyes locked on her with ruthless intent. The storm's remnants tossed them between gusts, yet neither yielded. Evelyn thought of Nathan, of the lost chick, of the nest trembling on the cliff. She fought with desperation, not only for herself but for the memory of what once was alive. The fight tore through the sky. Marcus struck first, his talons grazing Evelyn's shoulder. Pain seared through her, yet she clawed back with fury, her beak snapping at his wing. Feathers scattered like ashes into the wind. Marcus screeched, his power undeniable, but Evelyn's rage gave her strength. She drove herself upward, forcing him higher, away from the nest. Below, the valley shuddered with echoes of their battle. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see who would fall and who would endure. Marcus pulled away, his cry sharp, carrying warning and promise. He circled once more, but did not descend. Instead, he drifted toward the horizon, leaving Evelyn trembling in the air. She returned to the cliff, feathers torn, chest heaving. The nest waited in silence, its emptiness heavier than ever. The truth burned within her. Nathan was gone. She had been left with a rival circling her skies, a storm that still lingered, and the fragile remains of what once was life. The silence was no accident. It was destiny sharpening its edge. Night pressed against the mountain, cloaking the valley in shadow. Evelyn perched on the cliff, her chest heaving, feathers torn from battle. The silence of Nathan's absence weighed heavier than the storm. Hunger carved into her bones, but grief carved deeper. Then, a sudden cry split the night. Marcus returned, his shadow crossing the moon. Evelyn's heart ignited with fury. She launched herself into the dark sky, her scream shattering the silence. This was no longer about territory. It was survival. One would fall, and the mountain would decide who endured. The two eagles clashed mid-air, talons striking, wings beating with thunderous force. Their cries tore through the night, echoing across the mountains. Marcus struck downward, his weight crushing, but Evelyn twisted, raking her claws across his chest. Feathers scattered like sparks. Pain lanced her side, but she fought harder, rage replacing exhaustion. The valley below seemed to hold its breath, wolves staring silently, forest still as stone. The sky became their battlefield, and the moon bore witness to their war. Neither would retreat, for retreat meant death. Marcus dove with brutal force, his talons striking Evelyn's wing. She faltered, spiraling downward. The wind screamed in her ears, cliffs rushing toward her. Yet at the last moment she twisted, catching the current, rising again with raw defiance. Her chest burned, her wing ached, but her spirit surged. She drove herself upward, smashing into Marcus with full fury. Their bodies tangled, talons tearing, beaks snapping. Evelyn's scream was not fear. It was the cry of survival. This was her mountain. This was her fight. The struggle twisted them downward, their wings thrashing against each other. Evelyn struck with all her strength, her beak slashing across Marcus's shoulder. He shrieked, stumbling midair, his power faltering for the first time. She seized the chance, driving her talons into his wing. Marcus fought back with desperation, but his cry wavered. The valley echoed with violence, the forest trembling with the sound. Evelyn's body shook, but she did not let go. She forced him toward the abyss, her scream carrying through the storm-darkened night. Marcus plummeted, his wings torn, his cry fading into the abyss below. Evelyn hovered above, her chest heaving, wings trembling with exhaustion. Feathers drifted like ash around her. She returned to the cliff, talons gripping stone, her body battered, but unbroken. The nest remained silent, yet her scream tore across the valley once more, raw and defiant. She had fought, she had endured, and though loss had scarred her, she had claimed survival. The mountain answered with silence, yet this silence no longer defeated her. It crowned her the victor. Dawn broke over the mountains, painting the cliffs in pale light. Evelyn perched on the nest, her feathers torn, her body weak, but still alive. The silence of the shells cut into her, sharper than any talon. Marcus had fallen, yet victory felt hollow. She scanned the horizon, hoping Nathan would appear, but the sky stretched empty. Her scream rose once more, not of rage, but of sorrow. The valley answered with stillness, carrying her cry into endless space. Survival had been won, but love had been lost. The forest below stirred awake, trees swaying gently in the morning wind. Wolves retreated into the shadows, their howls fading into distance. Evelyn spread her wings slowly, her body trembling with fatigue. She gazed downward, knowing the valley still hungered, but for now it had released her. The mountain was no kinder, yet the storm had passed. She pressed her beak against the nest, tender and mournful. The shells lay still, but her touch carried memory, as though Nathan's strength lingered there. Evelyn launched into the air, wings heavy but unbroken. She soared over the valley, the wind pressing against her body, guiding her upward. Below, rivers glistened, swollen from the storm. She rose higher, her scream piercing the silence, a cry that carried both grief and defiance. The mountain returned her voice in echoes, weaving her pain into its stone. For every loss, the air reminded her she still endured. The silence no longer consumed her, it had become part of her flight. She drifted over ridges where Nathan once flew, her eyes fixed on the path he had carved across the skies. His absence weighed heavily, yet his memory rode with her in the wind. Each gust felt like his wings guiding her, each shadow like his strength enduring beyond loss. Evelyn soared higher, not to escape grief, but to carry it. The mountain had taken much, yet it had left her alive. Life itself was her victory. She screamed again, her voice carrying his echo with her. As the sun climbed, Evelyn returned to her cliff, her shadow long against the stone. She perched beside the nest, gazing outward. The shells lay broken, yet they remained a testament that life had once fought here. Her heart ached, but she did not bow. She raised her head high, wings trembling, and screamed once more. The sound was sharp, haunting, and unyielding. The silence that followed was not defeat, it was acceptance. She had lost much, but she had endured, and in her endurance, the mountain bowed to her will. The mountain stood still, its cliffs carved against the sky like stone guardians. Evelyn perched on the jagged edge, her feathers glinting faintly in the fading light. She stared into the distance, where Marcus had fallen and Nathan had vanished. The silence pressed close, wrapping her in its weight, yet she did not lower her head. Her gaze remained sharp, her body steady. She had endured storms, hunger, wolves, and the rival's claws. The nest was broken, but her will was not. She waited, not for return, but for memory. The valley exhaled, its forest swaying gently, rivers whispering with life. Evelyn lifted her wings, catching the final rays of the sun. She screamed once, sharp and piercing, her cry rising into the heavens. The echo carried across the cliffs, fading into shadows. It was no longer a cry of grief, nor of anger, but of defiance. The silence that returned was no enemy. It was her companion now. In the emptiness, she found her strength. In the loss, she found her truth. She soared once more, her wings carving through the dusk air. The wind embraced her, lifting her higher. The mountains blurred below, and the rivers shimmered like veins of silver. Evelyn's cry trailed behind her, a thread stitching her existence into the sky. She was no longer simply a mother guarding her nest. She was survival itself, enduring beyond loss. Nathan's memory carried her forward, his shadow in every gust, his strength in every beat of her wings. She belonged to the silence now, and the silence belonged to her. The world below quieted as night descended. Wolves slunk back into darkness, the forest dimmed, and the cliffs turned to silhouettes. Evelyn hovered above, framed against the last trace of light. Her wings trembled with exhaustion, but her eyes burned with fire. She had carried pain, she had fought storms, and she had endured loss. The silence did not break her. It forged her. In that silence, her presence roared louder than any predator, louder than death itself. She had become the echo of survival. The stars emerged, piercing the night with quiet brilliance. Evelyn perched once more upon the cliff, her shadow etched against the moonlit stone. She lowered her head, then lifted it again, releasing a final cry. The sound was sharp, unforgettable, echoing across the mountains. When silence returned, it was eternal, carved into stone, etched into sky. The chick was gone, Nathan was gone, but Evelyn remained. Her scream was her legacy, her silence her crown. The eagle screamed across the sky, yet silence reigned where its chick once cried.